welcome to It's Only a Prototype podcast. I am Tom, and with me is Phil, the director of D2M Product Design Agency.
In this podcast series, we are talking to some amazing entrepreneur innovators, and we are also talking to some leading industry experts. We're trying to glean what it is that makes a commercially successful product to help all of us as we develop new products and launch them into the market. In this episode, we are talking to Matt Dyson, who is the brains behind the Rockit. It's amazing. They have sold so many rockets now, over 800,000. And Matt is a real expert in bootstrapping, in keeping those costs really minimal while developing and launching and testing a new product. So we're really looking forward to this conversation. Hello, Matt.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you for your time. But for anyone that maybe new to your product, would you mind introducing yourself and your background?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm Matt Dyson. I'm the co-founder at Rockit, and my early career was working in advertising as an art director in London, Ogilvy Mather, a big agency there. After a few years, I decided to retrained as a teacher, teaching product design in schools and colleges, and I've taught design technology and product design for 20 years before I then started thinking I've helped all these students over the years come up with their own design ideas and develop products. You know, there were ideas for products myself that I wanted to sort of pursue and perhaps commercialize.
And the origin of the concept, I think, is really fun and interesting to the listeners. But would you mind just describing what Rockit is before we then go into kind of how you came up with the idea and obviously dig deeper into it?
Yeah, so basically Rockit is a small device that fits onto any pram or pushchair, and it turn it on and it gently rocks it. There's a speed dial at the bottom, an on-off switch at the top. It fits onto the stroller, onto any stroller with this simple bracket, and when it's in position, when you come to a halt, you can turn that on and the baby is sort of tricked into thinking they're still trundling along and hopefully will stay asleep.
Yeah. I'm at the end of it's my third child now and just about coming out of the nap phase, but I am kicking myself that I didn't come across this any earlier. So on that note, I'm just going to pause it there because it's otherwise just going to distract me and maybe quite literally rock me to sleep, I think. So it's good. But on that note, would you mind kind of taking us back to the point where you were starting to become, I wouldn't say disillusioned with teaching, but maybe you wanted to go and do something else? I mean, people talk about the importance of luck in this journey, but tell us about your brother-in-law and how you guys got together.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So Nick Webb, he's actually Dr. Nick Webb because he's got a PhD in vibration and acoustics, which
that's useful.
Comes in handy with that sort of product. He basically had his first daughter, his only daughter, Abby, and she was about 3 months old. I should point out that he's my brother-in-law, as well as my co-founder. And at a family Christmas party, he took me to one side and showed me a very rough prototype. I mean, just to take a little step backwards, Abby was notorious for not sleeping. She absolutely refused to sleep in a pushchair or pram. So if we went out for a family meal at a pub, Nick would always be pacing around the pub garden, never able to sit down and join the rest of the family. So I knew to my peril that she was a screamer if a pushchair stopped moving. So one night he had a light bulb moment, in effect. He basically got up in the middle of the night, took an old printer apart, desoldered the motor, soldered together a very simple speed control circuit, lashed some nuts and bolts to the spindle of the motor with some gaffer tape, and then the next day gaffer taped that to Abigail's pushchair. And he took her out for the normal sort of morning walk, and for the first time ever, she stayed asleep whilst he stopped for a coffee at his local coffee shop. He turned it on and it gently rocked the pushchair and tricked her into thinking they were still moving along.
Wow.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's the best type of prototype. There's really kind of early lash ups.
Yes, yeah. Well, I always sort of say Heath Robinson, much to Nick's annoyance. So, but yeah.
I think the thing is that first prototype gives so much more confidence, doesn't it? Because you've got something that actually proves it. You know,
yeah,
strapped into a buggy,
really.
Child stays asleep.
I mean, he showed me this. He took me to one side, as I say, at a Christmas party. and showed me it rocking, and it was tiny, and it was rocking this heavy pushchair, and Abby was in it, and she was fast asleep, and I was like, how on earth is it doing it? It was sort of like black magic. It looks this tiny object rocking a huge structure like that. And so we spent the rest of Christmas, my Christmas holiday, I was teaching, my Christmas holiday, we spent sort of Googling, seeing if there were other products out there, and there wasn't really anything. I remember seeing the first ever episode of Dragon's Den, and there was a large mains-operated platform that you wheel a pushchair onto, you plug it in, and it rocked it. Clever idea, but it was quite sort of noisy, very, very large. You couldn't take it out and about. Nick bought one of those. It just didn't sort of meet the demands he had, and so he decided to come up with something himself. Showed me, knew I had this sort of background in product design teaching, and I literally gave my notice in that very next beginning of term. Went to see my head teacher and said, I'm going to quit. Giving my notice in. And so, yeah, that's the sort of starting point for the story.
Fantastic. And I think I really want to dig into the development of it a lot more. But just before we do that, how successful is it now?
So we're selling into over 40 countries around the world. It's, I think, last count, we manufactured and sold over 800,000 units. So we're getting close to a million Rockits in the world. And yeah, I mean, we have to pinch ourselves because our first order was for 5,000 units, and we thought we'd be lucky if we sold those. We thought this is going to be a fun journey. Mm-hmm. It was a big commitment, but we were ready for that sort of ride, and we're expecting maybe to sell the 5,000 over a period of a year, but it just went bonkers.
That's fantastic. And give us some kind of idea, 800,000 pieces, what percentage, say, of new mums, buy as a Rockit?
Yeah, I think we did some maths the other day and worked out that in the UK, we would say between 15 and 20% of all new parents buy a Rockit or have a Rockit bought for them. So we've got a large sort of slice of the market based on our UK sales, we calculated.
Oh, that's fantastic. So just going back again then, so you've given up your job, you've got a prototype that is not really a saleable product at that point. What comes next?
Yeah, so my background, as I say, was product design. I'd had sort of limited experience of using CAD software that I taught at school. So I had genned up a bit more on that. I bought some 3D printers. I'd been using them at school, the very, very early 3D printers that were available, and I bought a couple. And I started prototyping. I worked a bit of notice at school, which was good. So I was able to sort of stay late in the workshop and use the lathes and things like that to help with prototyping. But the majority of it was done at home in the evenings whilst I worked my notice. And yeah, I think this was one of the very early stage prototypes. In fact, the first one we made, which is a little bit embarrassing to look at now, but it basically, the idea was to turn Nick's invention into a marketable product. So we knew we had to come up with something that was going to resonate with people, be memorable. The name of the product was going to be really important. So that was the first thing we did, was sit down and start thinking, what could this product be called? Came up with Rockit. That lent itself in terms of its shape really nicely to housing the mechanism that Nick had invented. And that is where it all started. That very sort of Tintin-esque Rockit. And so that was all done, the prototyping by myself, and then we sort of realized that we needed a bit more help, and not only help but money as well. I'd given up my job, was working sort of part-time, but doing some 3D printing consultancy work, but it was not enough to sustain, so we needed money to help us move the product forward, and that's at that point I started to look at entering competitions and applying for grants as well. So we did two things. We entered something called the Baby Product Association's Innovation Award. and we had to do a pitch up in London with this very Rockit, and we were lucky enough to be a finalist in that, which the prize wasn't a cash prize, but it was the opportunity to exhibit at Harrogate, which is the largest international baby show. So we won this opportunity to exhibit at Harrogate, at the big baby show up there. And we literally just had a couple of roller banners, a table, and some 3D prototypes, one of which is there. And we went and exhibited, and it was incredible. The reaction we got was amazing. You know, we thought a few people might come along and take pity on us and say hello and ask a few questions. But we had queues of people. After about the first morning, news got round that there was quite an innovative product in the halls. And we had the likes of the John Lewis buyer queuing at our stand. We didn't know they were the John Lewis buyer. They're notorious for turning their badges around so you can't tell who they are. Right. We were told that they were queuing at our stand for 5-10 minutes waiting to speak to us, and it obviously gave us fantastic validation for the product.
And when you say 3D printed product, was it a functioning prototype or was it quite literally a shell?
No, it was functional prototype. So we had it rocking on a stroller. So yeah, it was quite, and the beauty of the product, and still to this day, the beauty of the product is that it's very visual. You know, you can't go anywhere in a city without seeing one, and one mum or dad will see another mum or dad with this and ask what it is, and it's a very visual product that sort of promotes itself, really. So that was the aim when we were looking at the branding and looking at the design as well.
This episode is sponsored by Strachan IP. Now, I've worked with Vicky Strachan for many years. She's an amazing attorney, and she just speaks in plain English, which is so helpful when you're trying to sort out IP protection on your idea. I use Vicky for all of my own intellectual property protection, and she's more than happy to do a free half-hour consultation. You can find the link in the show notes. And so how many prototypes did it take to go from the red one that you've got there, that I still think is great, by the way, to the kind of final manufactured product?
Probably in terms of the actual look and design, it went through probably hundreds of small tweaks, but there were probably about 10 stages, and I think you've got 5 of them here. We started with this, and we started then looking at how we could make it a bit more nurturing, to appeal to the target market, and looking at colours and making it a bit more subdued. The final design, this was the final one that we launched back in 2017. That was battery operated, so it worked with AA batteries, and the latest version is rechargeable.
And for those that are listening to this on the audio podcast, in the show notes, there'll be links to images of these different prototypes we're discussing now.
So, Matt, were you ever concerned about it being copied? And what did you do about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, this is a really critical question, especially as a startup. But we were very aware that we needed to protect the product before we showed anyone. So you have that as a founder of a startup, especially a product-based startup. You really do struggle with this idea. Do I show people my idea, especially if it's innovative? And obviously, protecting it with intellectual property rights is really important. So we applied for grants. We got an Innovate UK grant, which we used to apply for first patent, and also I think trademark registration and design rights registration. And we applied for those, and we made sure we had those in place before we exhibited. But I would just say, I'd take a bit of a step back, that we did show people before that under an NDA, and a non-disclosure agreement was really critical, because obviously investing lots of money into the tooling and manufacture a product, if people aren't going to buy it, it's a waste of money to do that. So we wanted validation really early stage. So we applied for all these intellectual property rights but at the same time, we had an NDA formalized and, by an IP lawyer that we could take to, say, a distributor of baby products and say, we'd like to show you this, please sign this, and we'll show you the product, and we'd like to get your opinion on it and whether you think it's a product that would be viable in the market. And we got some fantastic advice and feedback from various sort of retailers and distributors at that point. But that doesn't sort of substitute for getting really good IP protection legally. But it's expensive. And that's another thing. I know that we've always bootstrapped our business, and we had very little money to start with. I think we put very small, few £1,000s of directors' loans in to start with. We had some grants, but apart from that, we didn't have lots of money. I was a teacher. I didn't have lots of savings, so we had to do everything on a shoestring. And one of the things I did, which I'm a little bit ashamed of now, is I made appointments with about 5 or 6 different IP attorneys to get their opinion, and their first half-hour consultation is free. They're hoping that you'll be impressed by their knowledge and understanding and would use them. But I did that 5 times around Bristol, and each time I met a different IP expert, I would ask slightly different questions. So I had about 2.5 hours of free advice.
That's a great bit of advice. I generally think that, because I assume you're now using one of those.
We're using several of them, yeah.
Yeah. So it's worth their time, and it's worth the startups people's time when you are really struggling. It makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it was really important.
And have you now used that IP protection? Because obviously it was expensive, and a lot of people are like, well, I can never afford to defend it, even if it did, get copied. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, we were really being very fortunate in that for probably 5 or 6 years, we didn't have a serious competitor. I think, that's quite common amongst new products, especially if they're sort of groundbreaking, innovative products. People want to see if they're successful first before they start investing in tooling. But more recently, in the last 18 months, we have seen quite a few copycat products from China on Alibaba, and they've then made their way onto Amazon in various parts of the world and onto other sites. We have enforced our IP to have a lot of those listings removed from Amazon, eBay, various other platforms as well. But obviously, if there are bigger brands that bring out a product that's similar to ours, but that doesn't do exactly what ours does, or does it in a different way, or looks different, it's very, very difficult to protect yourself against that. And you need deep pockets to fight them.
Matt, I'm really interested to know, you've spent all this money with attorneys, you've got all this IP protection. Have you used it, and has it cost you a fortune to enforce it, or are there ways that actually you can get benefit without it costing lots more money?
Yeah, so we've been really lucky. The first 6 years after we launched, we didn't really see a serious competitor. In the last 18 months, we've seen some cheap Chinese rip-offs, I suppose you could call them, copies of the product hit the market. And we've been using an agency to help us enforce our IP and have those removed from various platforms. They started on Alibaba and then have moved over to various platforms, including Amazon. And, we're using, as I say, an agency to help us to have those removed.
And is that costing a lot of money using that agency? Or?
No, it's relatively small amount of money. A lot of it's done, I think, through AI, binding the listings and then sending us cease and desist in effect. So no, that cost is relatively small, and a lot of what we've managed to get taken down has revolved around our trademark, which is incredibly cheap to apply for in the first place anyway, a trademark. So, and I think, we are now beginning to see larger brands preparing to launch products that do something very similar to ours. Obviously, they can't make it look like a Rockit. They can't use the technology inside that is patented, but we can't stop them doing a product that doesn't look like ours, that works in a slightly different way. But I think that just emphasised how important a really strong brand is. We've had sort of 6 years up to that point to really build our brand and focus on doing that.
And how does that make you feel? You've put your blood, sweat, and tears into this. You've got it up off the ground. You bootstrap this thing, and you start coming across these products.
Yeah, it's disappointing, and
Understatement, probably.
yeah, it is disappointing. I wrote an article in a magazine recently where I talked about, it's a shame that some brands don't really focus on innovation. They are just looking for products that are successful, and then they can tweak them and change them slightly and then launch them as their own. And I find that disappointing. Obviously, every business has their own ethos. It's not something we would do. We're very much focused on always trying to innovate. And, we wouldn't white label a product and badge it with Rockit logo. We always want to innovate and produce products that are original. But it's very disappointing, and obviously it's a concern in terms of how it might hit our bottom line. But we've got a very strong business, and so we're ready for the fight, really.
Mm-hmm. I've got to say, that might have been the most British response to a question I've ever heard, but I really appreciate it. Just take us back slightly now. So take us back to you've just won the the Baby Products Association Award. What's the next step in the journey?
Yeah, I think, Nick had run his own business before as a sole trader, worked as a music producer. But I'd never run a business before. We knew we had lots to learn. And, Google's fantastic, but you can't learn everything from Google. So we then entered another award, in effect, an accelerator program with the Design Council in London. I remember seeing the application. It was at the stage where we just had this prototype, and an teacher colleague of mine forwarded me the application form and said, "You should go for this." And I looked and read the criteria and thought, there's no way that we're going to get onto an accelerator program with the Design Council. And I put it to one side, and it was sort of niggling away at me. And the day before the deadline, I thought, well, might as well spend the day entering this accelerator. It was a long application, so I put an application together, and we were amazed to be selected to be on the shortlist. So we had to go up to London, present the idea, and we were then one of 10 to be placed on the accelerator program, which was 6 months of mentoring, with the opportunity at the end of that to pitch for a large sum of money. I think it was £100,000 in total. And it was fantastic. That 6 months went up, but I think it was every 2 weeks up to London. Got a mentor. We had various mentors looking at sort of branding, looking at sourcing for obviously finding somewhere to manufacture the product, business modeling, looking at routes to market. All of those things that, we needed to learn really quickly. And that was just really pivotal in upskilling us, basically. It was just Nick and myself at that time. And we did have a third co-founder who has since left the business, but it's just Nick and I now. And we needed to learn really quickly. And that was great. And at the end of that 6-month process, we had the opportunity, as I say, to pitch our idea, and we won I think £60,000 right at the period of time when we needed to commit to tooling the product. Wow, it was really fortuitous that came along at that time. And that we used some of that money for enhancing our own intellectual property, but the rest to pay for the tooling.
And just out of interest, if you hadn't won that money, did you have a plan as to how you were going to raise that kind of money?
No. We did. We always, in the back of our minds, we always thought we'd like to crowdfund. Eventually we did. After we launched the product, and 6 months after, we did a crowdfunding raise, which was very successful. We used a platform called Crowdcube, and it was really hard work, I hasten to add.
Yeah.
But we raised £250,000 and gave away, I think it was 12.5% equity in the business. Before that, we'd looked at angel investors and we'd looked at VCs as well, to get investment, and we'd had some offers, but the offers just weren't really right for us. We felt that they were undervaluing our business, the potential, and founders always feel that their business has got potential.
Yeah.
And we turned that down. It would have been very easy to accept it, and we decided to go down the crowdfunding route, and it was fantastic because in the end we had over 300 investors, small investors, people like our family and friends, but also the wider public that invested anything from £10, I think the lowest investment was, up to £20,000-30,000. And we've got over 300 investors, as I say, that are advocates for our product, so they're sort of cheering us on, at 8 or 9 years later. So
you mentioned then about how much work it was to raise that money in Crowdcube. I'm just really intrigued, like what takes the time up during that period?
Yeah, so as with any sort of investment, if you're pitching, you need a deck to sell the business, so you need a pitch deck. We really worked hard on making sure that was really branded carefully, and we had a vision for how the product. I mean, we'd launched the product by this stage, so we knew what the product would look like. We had a brand guidelines and such like. We really crafted that, and we did all of that ourselves. Needed to have a business plan, and I think we were sort of complemented by a lot of the angel investors we spoke to prior to the Crowdcube raise, saying that our business plan was really carefully, all the assumptions in it were carefully backed up. So where we'd made an assumption that we might sell X number in the first year, it was backed up. It was backed up with potential orders, letters of interest from big retailers. So we made sure that we crossed every T and dotted every I. And then the rest of the time was actually trying to find potential investors. You use the platform, the actual website, but you need to have got core investors on board first.
Right.
So you need a percentage, say 25% of the total that you're going for invested before you actually launch the campaign. And then it was a question of really maintaining momentum during that campaign. So it's a month-long campaign. The way those platforms tend to work is the last investment puts you at the top of the page on their platform. So we had the strategy of getting as many investors, whether they were £10 investors or £20,000 investors, getting as many investments as possible to keep us ranking high on the page. And we did that by actually withholding a lot of good news stories that we'd had in the few months prior to going live. So we knew that we were getting a listing with John Lewis, but we didn't announce that because we thought we can announce that halfway through our Crowdcube raise, and that's another really good piece of news that will encourage investment. We also, by chance, featured on a Channel 4 program called Buy It Now, which was like a Dragon's Den style program where you're pitching to studio audience, and that actually aired in the middle of our Crowdcube raise as well. And it's little bits of luck like that, alongside sort of hard work, really benefited us during that Crowdcube raise.
And when you got the final investment, you say £250,000. So that valued the business at kind of 2 million at that stage.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic to get that validation that we had a business that people saw potential in. But it was only potential at that stage. We'd only ordered 5,000 rockets, and we'd sold those ones, and were then ready to fund the next production run. But yeah, it was it was a real pat on the back, really, that we'd come up with this idea, or Nick had come up with this fantastic idea, and between us we'd turned it into this product that people were taking note of and thinking there was real potential in the market for.
And what other highs have there been along the journey that have kind of sustained you through doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably on the very simplistic level, on the very human level, actually seeing the product on people's strollers when you're out and about, I still get excited. I was out with my wife in Clevedon, which is very near to where we are in Bristol now, at the weekend, and we saw 3 or 4 people with Rockits on, and I still get excited when I see them.
Yeah.
And I didn't see one in the wild until, probably 2 years in. We've been selling them for 2 years. I had never seen one out on the streets. And this poor chap in St Ives, I was on holiday. I spotted it from the other side of the harbour and ran after him shouting, stop, stop. And much to his sort of bemusement, I took photos and then had to explain why I was taking photos. Took photos first. So that was a real high, seeing the product, especially the first time. Seeing it in John Lewis, obviously, goes without saying. That's quite something.
Mm-hmm.
But probably our biggest high was meeting the King in Buckingham Palace. In 2022, we were awarded 2 Queen's Awards for Enterprise, one for innovation and one for international trade. And I think that year only 7 businesses in the whole country got 2 awards, and most of those were big companies. I know past winners have been Rolls-Royce and Dyson and such like. So to 2 guys in a shed in Portishead designing this product, and then going to Buckingham Palace to be honoured like that was fantastic. Really good fun.
Yeah, no, and rightly so. And what you've achieved is remarkable. I've worked with hundreds of people over the last kind of 20 years. It's very, very difficult to go from an idea and that type of prototype you described to a commercially successful product. What do you think's made the difference in terms of Rockit and achieving that?
I think timing was important. There wasn't a product like that on the market, so innovation probably is the key driver. I think it is a rocket that rocks it. It's very simple messaging is key to its success. But I also think the simplicity of the product. We see a lot of products in our sector, nursery sector, that are app controlled, that have multiple features. We have always thought, what does the customer want? The customer is a worn out mum or dad, and you'll know that. It's exhausting.
What are you trying to say?
Yeah. It's exhausting. You want to be able to turn it on, turn a dial to get the speed, and it does what it does. Apps, updating them, they then don't connect properly. It sounds like we're just sort of steering away from technology. We're not. Some of our other products we're developing have got more technology in them, but I think that the success of Rockit has been down to the user interface being very, very simple as well. Analog sort of controls.
And often the simplest products are the hardest to design, in my experience. So can you tell us a little bit about the design challenges that you faced to kind of get to a point where you have a product that is that simple?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge, especially with the first iteration, so the first iteration was the AA battery version, we had to make sure that the product fitted on every single stroller and pram on the market. And we decided to go with a sort of 2-fix system. So there's a bracket that you pre-fit to the stroller that can then remain on the stroller. And you then fit the Rockit when you need it. But that bracket is probably the simplest aspect of the product, which caused us just the most grief in terms of the design. It has to withstand millions of vibrations in its lifetime. As I say, it has to fit onto 200 different styles of stroller. So that caused problems, and it was very much, obviously, very early stages. I think I was still working part-time. My 3D printer was just running constantly with multiple iterations of the bracket. And then I'd spend my weekends with my daughter, poor thing, visiting mother care and other baby shops and spending literally 4 or 5 hours putting prototypes on different strollers, taking photos and videos and testing it. And, that was a real challenge. And yeah, as I say, it's probably the most simple part of the product, but caused the most issues in terms of the design.
Yeah, that's often the way. And just switching now to talk a bit more about commercial strategy. So I think I'm right in saying that you use generally a distributor model, even in your home territory, i.e. the UK. So tell us a little bit about why you're taking that route, because obviously you end up losing a lot of margin. So yeah, I was just interested to know how you came to that decision, really.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Phil. I mean, I think we got lots of advice from business mentors whilst we were doing the Design Council Accelerator. And I remember a conversation with one of them who was absolutely adamant that we should launch the product on our own website, just in the UK, perhaps see how sales go for a couple of years, make sure there's no issues with the product, refine it, and then perhaps launch it worldwide after that. But we knew we had such an innovative product that we wanted to have a footprint far and wide as quickly as possible. So we made a very conscious decision to ignore that advice and launch the product worldwide, start exporting from day one. And the only way we could really do that with a team of two was to use distributors. So it was kind of forced upon us that we needed to use that model. But at the same point, we realized that actually those distributors know the parents in their market better than we do. So, we had an Australian distributor very early on, Canadian, Israeli, all sorts of countries. And each market's very different in how they market a product like this. And we knew that they would have the expertise to do that. So we made sure that our contracts had provisions in them that they have to invest in marketing the product and not just be a salesperson that would sell on to retailers. So we then, as I say, have gradually over the years moved into about 40 countries, and we're in all the big retailers in each of those countries. We needed to make sure that we had that footprint and that brand awareness, really to ensure that the product had longevity, and that's probably been another factor in how we've fought off copies, in that the retailers, are stocking our product, and retailers, if a product's selling well, they don't like ditching it for another product. So we're not complacent, but at the same point, that has been a key factor. And yeah, that's where you're right. It does hit your margin. But I think we've grown very, very rapidly because of that. And we've, put our flag in the sand in lots of different countries as well. So it's been the right strategy for us.
So that all makes sense. And I get that, just the two of you. But surely, having sold 800,000 worldwide, you're a larger organization now. And if you are larger, then what's been the logic behind the way you've expanded your team?
Yeah, I mean, we're not much larger. There's a team of five of us now, four of us, plus some part-time people as well helping us. So the core team is still tiny. And that's another benefit of obviously using a distribution model. You don't have to have hundreds of staff all over the world. You're using distributors to help you. But we've always kept it really lean. Just going back to the Crowdcube raise, there were lots of contemporaries raising money at the same time as us that we sort of kept an eye on over the years. And a lot of them have gone to the wall because, they got this investment, and many of them got lots more money than we did, but they burnt through that money so quickly because they overhired, and they had flashy offices that they couldn't sustain. So we've always sort of kept it as lean as possible, and we still do. We outsource a lot of things. So where we need help, whether that be with video production or what have you, we would outsource that. Warehousing, we don't have our own warehouse. We outsource that as well. So we're always trying to think, how can we keep the team small, but large enough to sort of maintain growth. So yeah, that's it. A lot of people, if I do a lot of talks at conferences, and people often say, Rockit must be, 100 employees around the world. And they're amazed to hear that no, we've got four of us working full time.
And I can appreciate the lack of the headache
Mm.
of not having to the HR issues and the management of the team, but having all those, distributors and those relationships to maintain must come with its own kind of overhead.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it does. It can be stressful, and you can take your eye off the ball. That is something that has happened. That distributors will perhaps not be marketing as much as we'd like them to, and we haven't noticed that for 6 months, and because we just haven't got the person power to be looking at that constantly. So yeah, I mean, it has an impact, but we've kept on top of most things, I think. So,
and how's your role evolved from being an art director at a school all the way through to now being this kind of bootstrapped entrepreneur? I imagine you're not doing the same thing you were doing from day one. Have you evolved with your role?
Yeah, I mean, I find it quite hard to let go of things. So my colleagues will tell you this, that I've always been responsible for the marketing, the PR within the business, and I'm trying to sort of let go, but I'll still be doing TikToks on a Wednesday at lunchtime. We'll be off, to a local cafe filming TikToks. So I like to be as involved as possible, but we are looking to expand the team now, so that Nick and myself can take a very strategic view of the business and look at new product development. I mean, that's one of the things, the downsides of a small team is that you can make decisions very quickly, which is a positive, but the resources, it's difficult to get things moving quickly when you're being pulled in lots of different directions. So yeah, we are at the stage now where we are beginning to sort of scale in terms of the team, so that Nick and I can focus on strategy, but also new product development.
The image of you going to a local cafe to record a TikTok is now burnt into me. I appreciate that image.
You have to look up the TikTok channel.
Yeah, don't go. It'll be in the show notes for anyone that's interested.
So just thinking about team and the kind of attitudes and characteristics and skills that you need to make the business succeed, a lot of designers obviously only ever kind of have the idea, never make it a commercial success. So what within you and your kind of character you think has led you to be able to kind of morph yourself from a designer to a business leader, basically?
I think that's a really good question, and I think I can remember one thing that really spurred me on, and it was when I gave my notice in at the school and said I was going to give up teaching to develop this product, and people are aware of the type of product I was sort of hoping to develop. I remember sitting in the staff room, and my head of department or a member of staff, I can't remember who it was, I overheard them discussing me leaving and saying he'd be begging for his job back in 6 months. Mark my words, if he thinks he can launch a new product and make it commercially viable, he's got another thing coming. And that sort of comment has really sort of stuck in my head. So alongside Nick, who is fantastic business person, he's run his own business for years, ever since he left university. He's meticulous in terms of the numbers, very talented in terms of engineering as well. But between us, we've got, I think, very different skill sets. Mine is more about the look of products and design and within the office as well. We have different personalities, so we deal with the staff in the office in different ways. But I think it was that desire to make it succeed. My mum, just as an aside, my mum passed away just as I decided that I was going to sort of start working on Rockit, and it all happened very quickly. And she was always said to me, "You've just got to follow your dream and do whatever you think is right for you." And my wife as well, she has always had that mentality and has always encouraged me. And just, as I say, that comment in the staff room, plus those other two very important people in my life, spurred me on to learn. Has a hell of a lot to learn if you're commercializing a product, and it's fun. I mean, at the end of the day, it's great fun. I mean, who wouldn't want to bring a product to market? It's it didn't feel like work. It was hard work, but it didn't really feel like work. And it wasn't somebody paying my salary. It was me trying to get this to be a success so that I could pay my own salary eventually, which took a few years.
And also not only fun, clearly, but you're actually solving a real problem, a need. You're reducing the stress of young parents, which I think is a really kind of powerful calling as well. So, on behalf of young parents, I'd like thank you for that as well.
Not that young.
Not that young.
On behalf of aging parents.
Yeah. Slightly tight, slightly knackered parents. I thank you. Yeah, that's
I appreciate the sentiment. Yeah. And Matt, has it been like success after success along the way, or have there been some other failures in there that we could learn from?
There's been ups and downs. I mean, I think the distribution is certainly something that we made mistakes with various stages. We were very flattered in the early days at big trade shows where a big distributor would come to us and promise us the earth and say we could sell hundreds of thousands of these products a year. And we'd sign up with them, and then we'd be a very small fish in a very large sea because they had hundreds of products on their books. So we've had to extract ourselves from various contracts and let those expire before we've found often very small distributors that are often family businesses like ours that really love the product, and they're almost I talk about a small team, but they are our team as well. All of these distributors in various countries, and we're in effect helping them make a livelihood. So yeah, we made mistakes in that respect, being flattered by these big players and then realizing that, we have to wait a year to switch to a much more proactive distributor. So that was a key one.
Yeah. And so in making an idea a commercial success, clearly there are lots of different elements, one of which might be the kind of distribution strategy, having the right partners, all that kind of stuff. How much of it do you think is actually the core idea in itself, and how much of the success is everything else you've got to build around it?
I think to launch the product, the idea is so important, so if that product hadn't been successful within 6 months, hadn't gained some traction so that we could have afforded to go on to production run 2 and 3, it would have been dead in the water. So I think that question, you can sort of ask it right at the beginning of the journey, and I would say 100% the product, the product, the branding, those things. But I think to grow that business, it's a much more nuanced answer. And you're right, choosing the right partners, having the right PR. And again, we've done all of that on a very small budget. But it's worked really well for us. And we probably could have pushed harder and invested more and grown perhaps more quickly, but we've done it in a sort of sustainable way, I think.
And most designers, I assume you're the same, have a black book of ideas, basically. And what makes it to kind of number one idea on that? You've talked about the fact you're developing other things. How do you choose what the right idea is to then kind of take?
Wow, yeah, that is a really good question. For us, the innovation would be a key thing. So every product, we've launched 3 products to date, and we've got another one that's in development, just starting to manufacture. Having a product that is innovative, nothing quite like it on the market, is really important. It's such a crowded market, particularly in the nursery sector. So having that sort of standout USP is really important, but it's got to be relevant as well. So it's not just it's a really original idea. There's got to be potential. And, I'll be totally honest, we didn't do much market research when we launched Rockit. We were almost scared to get the feedback at times. And we did it with retailers and we did it with distributors, but the general public, we did very little. And we do more of that now. So we do focus groups and we do market research to establish whether an idea has got legs. So very early stage prototypes we'll show, again, under NDA, all done very carefully. So yes, that's probably the thing would be innovation in the Black Book, but innovation with a purpose that's going to meet the needs of the customer.
That's great.
So it looks like we're getting towards the end of the conversation now. It's been wonderful, been really interesting and inspirational. I'm wondering if you could go back in time to yourself at the start of the journey. What advice would you give yourself? And I'm wondering if that would be the same advice as you give anyone else who just asked for some advice at the start of their journey.
Yeah, I think probably to worry less. I talk about it being great fun, and it is, but I don't want to mislead your listeners, viewers. It is hard work and there's a lot to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're developing a product, especially a baby product, I think I've learned to sort of switch off in the evenings.
Mm-hmm.
It's ironic, I design products to help babies sleep, but my sleep is awful. But it's getting better because I am able now to sort of switch off and think, actually, I could worry all night about a particular issue within the business and then wake up exhausted and not be able to deal with that problem. Or I can have a good night's sleep and wake up and be fit and well to deal with it in the morning. I think that's the advice I would give myself, to worry less, sleep more, and deal with things in the morning.
It is hard though, isn't it, to disconnect the worry from, because you care, you genuinely care, and that's why it's been so successful. So is it caring or is it worrying? I'm not sure what the difference is, but from my experience, when you have a decent amount of sleep the next day, that worry you had the day before is probably about 75% smaller, just because you've got more energy and the ability to process it better.
Yes, yeah. No, I totally agree with that.
What's next for Rockit and the team?
So, as I previously mentioned, we've sort of got a new product that's in the pipeline. So we're really excited about that. It's loads of work. It seems to get more difficult the more products we launch, in terms of doing it quickly. It always takes a lot longer than you imagine. But we've got a product that hopefully by the end of this calendar year we'll be launching. Again, it's very innovative. It's to do with sleep, and we've always been really focused on that core sector within nursery. So that's really exciting, but also looking at sort of new markets to export to as well, and really growing the markets that we've got. We as I touched on before, we're going to have more time, Nick and myself, to look at markets that are performing well, that aren't performing quite so well, and look at why, and supporting our distributors to improve that. But yeah, South America is a market that we've had real success in, Chile, and but there are other countries over there that we'd like to really sort of make sure that we get a decent foothold in as well.
Now, it's well known that having a co-founder is hard work. It's almost like dating or a marriage, right? You've got to really get to know each other really well. I can only imagine it's doubly so that he's your brother-in-law. So what's the dynamic been like? And any advice for people who are working with co-founders with their own projects?
Yeah, I mean, it can be challenging at times, but I mean, I think there's a real mutual respect between us. We're not related through blood; we're only related through marriage. So there's the mutual respect. We know each other's strengths, but of course we're going to disagree on things, and we do. But I think we always have got the key best interests of the business and best interests of our employees and distributors at heart, and the parents that buy our products. So any sort of slight disagreement on is usually resolved really quickly. We do get on incredibly well. My wife, who is Nick's sister, the only downside is that she sees less of Nick than I do, of course. So she'd like to see more of him. And if we do go out for family events, we tend to be talking Rockit, which is never a good idea. Yeah. So,
Brilliant.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been really insightful, and best of luck to you and the team as you strive to do those things and grow the business.
Thank you very much to both of you. It's been fun chatting.
Great.